Sleepwalking is a crazy thing. If it doesn't affect you or someone you know, you might not think much about it. But it's very real and can be really scary. I'd sleepwalked a few times in my life, but I always woke up and got back to bed. It was something I experienced more when I was younger. So, when I was looking for a roommate and found a guy named Brandon, I wasn't too worried when he told me he occasionally sleepwalked. Brandon moved in August 2012, and only a month in, the night terrors began. Something he had completely forgotten to mention. I'd wake up around 3 or 4 in the morning to the sound of him screaming. Not like he saw a spider, but like someone was in his room trying to murder him. Whenever I went to check on him, by the time I reached his bedroom, he was fast asleep and quiet as a mouse. This continued for months. He'd scream, I'd wake up, and he'd be completely asleep by the time I went to check and make sure everything was okay. Eventually, I stopped checking on him because every time I did, he was fine. I decided to try and talk to him about it. I wanted to see him see a sleep specialist or something to get this sorted out. Most mornings, when I saw him, he'd barely be able to walk from all the screaming he'd done the night before. But every time I mentioned it, he said he didn't know what I was talking about and that he never had a problem with screaming in his sleep. He believed me but wasn't willing to see anyone regarding the issue because he thought it was surreal and he was just too busy. By month 5, the actual sleepwalking started. It began with me occasionally hearing his bedroom door open and him walking around the house. The floorboards would creak under his feet. The few times I went to make sure he was okay or see what was going on, it was obvious he wasn't awake. He told me not to wake him up if I ever found him sleepwalking, so I didn't. I let him walk around for hours sometimes before he would make his way back to bed or sometimes even fall asleep right there on the floor. A few weeks after getting used to him walking around the house at night, I was shocked to wake up to him opening the door to my room. I couldn't see him but didn't bother asking who it was or what he was doing because I was sure he was asleep. I turned the flashlight on my phone and saw Brandon standing at the corner of my room, facing the wall. He had told me that if he ever made his way into my room, to just guide him back to his room and lock the door behind me. So I did that. From then on, he'd occasionally make his way into my room, and I always put him back where he belonged. It was irritating for a while, but I guess I just got used to it. It was like taking care of a kid or something. Brandon was a genuinely nice guy, and I had no other reason to kick him out, so I put up with his weird sleep habits. Even started bringing random things into my room, my toothbrush from the bathroom, a screwdriver, or something equally meaningless. He'd leave the items at the foot of my bed, and I'd wake up to him standing there with them, almost like he was waiting for a reaction. But that couldn't have been the case. He was asleep. His sleepwalking stopped bothering me altogether when I realized that if I left him alone, he'd find his way back to his room eventually. It even stopped waking me up when he came into my room. I had learned to sleep through it, and I knew he was still coming in because I'd wake up to my door open when it was closed the night before or see the things he left behind. One morning, I found something on the foot of my bed that started making me sweat just looking at it. It was a picture of me sleeping, clearly taken on a Polaroid camera. I showed Brandon that morning and he started to apologize. He told me he probably took it while he was sleepwalking, and we joked about him being a sleep photographer. I got over it pretty quickly and just chalked it up to another weird thing. Well, I told him I got over it, but that day I went out and bought a new doorknob with a lock for my room. I didn't want him coming in unannounced anymore, and it seemed like a good solution. He even told me it was a good idea so he wouldn't wake me up anymore. I installed it that night, and there was a sense of relief when I went to sleep with a locked door for the first time since living with Brandon. That night, I woke up to the sounds of Brandon's body slamming into my door over and over, almost like he wasn't registering that it wasn't opening. I got up from my bed and opened the door to lead him back to his room, but instead, he pushed his way past me and into the room. I tried turning him around, but he was set on where he wanted to go. He got on his hands and knees and reached under my bed, pulling out a small wooden box. I stood beside him as he set it on my bed and opened it, revealing its contents. Inside were more pictures of me sleeping, and next to the pictures was a 6-inch long knife. I had never noticed those things under the bed before, but I guess I just never thought to check. He grabbed the knife and stood over the spot in my bed where I'd usually be sleeping and just started stabbing the mattress and my pillow. I immediately freaked out, screaming for him to stop. Thank God he woke up. He just looked at me, at the knife, and at what he'd done to my bed. In one swift movement, he exited my room without saying a word. I stood there in shock for a while, wondering what in God's name had just happened or if this was going to happen again. I looked at my destroyed bed and was just speechless. I locked my door at that moment as it was close to sunrise and just waited it out. I couldn't sleep again. In my haze, I eventually went to work. The next day, I came home to his room empty and all of his things gone. I wanted to make a formal complaint with the police, but I never did. I tried to get a hold of him, but there was no one I knew who knew him either, and he didn't answer his phone. I never heard from him after that and refrained from getting a new roommate until about a year after that happened. I suppose it's for the best that he left. I was planning on kicking him out after that, but it was like he just up and disappeared. He'd obviously planned on killing me and whatever subconscious thought process he had going on while sleepwalking, but he just didn't know it. It was like the person he was when he was sleepwalking was a different person than who he was when he was awake. I just never knew it was possible to actually murder someone in your sleep. If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe to the channel for future videos and like and share with your friends. Hello everyone. Bear with me as today I will tell you this weird, scary, and absolutely awful experience that was my life for 2 months in 2015. The best place to get started is by giving a little background. My 2 friends and I decided we wanted to rent a house in LA since we all got jobs in the area. I dreamed of living together after we all got out of college. We got a pretty decent price for rent that was split between all of us, but we also thought that if we had one more person as a roommate, the rent would be perfect. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house, so we had the space. My friend Molly said she knew someone who needed the place, so it would be perfect. We all met her, got along great in the short amount of time we spent with her, so we all agreed it would be a good fit between the 4 of us. Our new roommate's name was Dove. For the first month that she lived with us, she was amazing. She did her share of the housework, and honestly, for the most part, she stayed pretty much to herself. She never had people over, never complained, and was generally one of the sweetest girls I'd ever met. We all used to talk about how lucky we were to find a roommate as great as Dove. That was until she met the man that would become her boyfriend, Ty. The first time she brought Ty over to the house, the 3 of us were shocked. He was covered in tattoos, including his face, and he reeked of marijuana and just had the worst attitude of anyone we'd all collectively ever met. Dove, on the other hand, either seemed not to notice or didn't really care. She took him into her room, and thankfully, we didn't see either of them for the rest of the night. The next morning, we woke up to find our TV, vintage stereo system, and our freaking microwave completely gone. Obviously, Ty had done this since he was the only person in the house besides the 4 of us girls, and we were livid. We banged on Dove's door until she came out and confronted her about it. Instead of denying it like we expected, she told us that she'd actually just given him the stuff. He said he needed it and she just told him to take it. She didn't see the problem and got mad at us for yelling at her for allowing him to just steal our things. She said she'd replace what was taken, but that was never really the point. We decided to forgive her, but told her if she was going to continue living with us, she couldn't have Ty over again since he was clearly terrible. She didn't like that, but agreed. A week went by, and nothing of significance happened. Then one random Tuesday night, when the 3 of us were watching a movie while Dove was out, we heard the door open. To our shock, in walked Dove holding the hand of Ty. She walked right by us like what we told her the week before meant nothing. She slammed the door when they got into her room. We decided to spend the night in the living room to possibly prevent him from taking anything else, but not even that worked. On his way out, Dove told him he could take whatever he wanted from the fridge. He grabbed a grocery bag and practically acted like he was shopping as he took most of what was in there. As we yelled at Dove that he was not allowed to take our stuff again, they ignored us like we weren't even there. Neither of them would even look in our direction. Ty just walked out of the door, and we stared as Dove made her way back to her bedroom, saying nothing as we asked her to explain what was going on with her lately. It didn't take long for us to realize Ty had gotten her hooked on pills and was just her hookup. To her, it seemed like getting what she wanted was all that really mattered. We watched for months as she deteriorated right in front of our eyes. The three of us had to move everything into our bedrooms to make sure it wouldn't get stolen in the night and installed locks on all of our doors since Dove and Ty constantly had random druggies come over to our house. No matter what we did or how much we begged Dove to see things logically or from our point of view, she refused. So we did what any sane person would do in a situation like this. We waited for Ty and his friends to come over and promptly called the police. They told us to leave the house before they got there. When we went to our neighbor's house and watched out the window as an actual SWAT team arrived and raided the place, Ty and a couple of his friends were arrested for multiple different things involving drug possession and sales, which we did mention, but we never expected this kind of reaction from the police. Dove was let go since Ty took the blame for everything. We were relieved. We thought maybe this would mean Dove could finally kick this habit, get some help, and just be done with that monster. They did end up searching the whole house, including our bedrooms, and the place was a disaster by the time we were allowed back in. Dove was irate. She screamed at us and told us that we ruined her life. We tried telling her that she needed to get help, but she refused and said that she'd be moving out as soon as possible since we had apparently betrayed her. We felt bad for her in the situation that she was in, but we were all kind of relieved too. A couple of weeks after Ty's arrest, we were all hanging out in the living room, not expecting what was about to happen. All of a sudden, the door burst open, and in came four guys wearing blue and black ski masks. They ran over to us as we were screaming and grabbed the three of us. One went into Dove's room and pulled her out as she was kicking and screaming. They dragged us outside, put us in a van that was waiting outside with the driver, and the rest of them piled into a car behind us. I was positive the neighbors had heard what was happening, and all I could do was hope that one of them had called the police. Once we were in the van, one of the men took our phones and told us all to be quiet. He drove for at least an hour with no word spoken until the van pulled over. They opened the door and threw us out. We were standing in the middle of a dirt field as they tied our hands behind our backs. Dove seemed the calmest as we all were beginning to beg for our lives. They told us we shouldn't have ratted on Ty and that we'd be paying for it with our lives. We all started to cry and beg and plead, but Dove, she seemed like she was laughing and started cracking up, calling us babies for crying. She told the guys to untie her hands and that it was a funny joke, but that she was over it and just let us go. Instead of doing what she said, one of the guys just decked her really hard in the face and told her to shut up. She hit the ground hard and then started crying herself. I actually believed then and there that I was going to die. These men were going to murder us, and that would be it. I was just hoping that they'd find my family so my family could maybe get some closure from my death. Those were the thoughts that I was thinking. Begging wasn't doing anything. We watched in horror as the men who had taken us began digging these large holes just in front of us. I was sure that that's where we would be buried. Just as I had started to come to terms with the fact that my life would be ending that night, in the distance, I could see flashing lights speeding towards us. I burst into tears. We were saved. The men tried to run, but it was a big dirt field, and there was nowhere for them to go. The police officers got over to us, untied our hands, and thankfully, they were able to apprehend all four men. We were escorted to the hospital. We didn't have any serious injuries, so we were let go that night. We all eventually went to my mom's house just outside of LA and waited to hear from the police about what was being done to ensure these men stayed in jail. They were all charged with kidnapping, assault, as well as conspiracy to murder. All four of them ratted on each other, and their sentence ranged from 17 to 25 years. We were glad this meant none would have the chance to finish what they started anytime soon. I guess that night was a wake-up call for Dove as well. She was also arrested and tried for being an accomplice. All of my roommates have kept in contact except, obviously, Dove. But we agreed we didn't want to live in that house after that happened. I still live with my mom. Molly and our friend Jenna live together in a small apartment in LA, and we all get together from time to time for lunch. I have PTSD from that night and still get nightmares about it. I'm just glad I have my parents to help me get through it. I urge anyone to be there for their friends if they notice red flags alluding to drug abuse. Even if they say they aren't ready to quit, sometimes just knowing there is a person that cares means more than you'll ever know. I probably should have taken my mom's advice when I started looking for a roommate, but hindsight is always 20/20, right? I was 22 years old in this story, so bear with me when you hear the absolute idiotic decisions I made during that time in my life. There's a huge detail anyone reading this story needs to know before it starts. Something I never planned on sharing, but thankfully nothing bad can come from it now. I've had a stalker since I was around 15. I never met him in person or knew the person making my life miserable, so my family did everything they could to keep me safe. It started at the end of my freshman year of high school. I began getting secret admirer notes left in my locker for me to find every morning when I opened it up to get my books. It was always stuff about how pretty I was and how amazing I looked the previous day. At first, I didn't think to tell my parents because it was probably just some guy in one of my classes with what I assumed to be a harmless crush. I was wrong, though, not about the person having a crush, but that maybe it was harmless. It actually was anything but. I got a car when I turned 16. Nothing crazy, just my mom's old minivan. I was so excited to finally be able to drive myself to school every morning. I never thought that that was information I'd have to keep to myself, so I didn't. I told everyone that would listen about how cool it was to have my car and how having a minivan was actually pretty fun. Lots of space and so on. It must have reached the wrong person at some point because the cute, innocent notes turned into gifts left on the hood of my car. I didn't trust them. I'd seen a bunch of videos on how kidnappers will leave stuff on your car so they can grab you while you're distracted and trying to grab it. So, instead of picking them up off my car like anyone else would have, I had whatever guy friend I could find come and take it and dump it in the trash for me. It happened a few times before I got a note in my locker telling me the gifts were from them and that they were safe to open. The next day, there was another gift on top of my car. I had a friend come out with me, and this time I decided to open it inside. It was something so incredibly creepy and inappropriate that I just had to tell my parents. Contained in the box was a scrapbook. The front read, "Our future life together." Inside were all these crudely photoshopped images of married couples with my picture over one of the couple's faces in each of the photos. The last half of the scrapbook was just my face photoshopped onto naked women's bodies, with messages along the side that said stuff like, "Can't wait to see you in this lingerie," and "I bet this is what your body looks like." I started crying right there in the parking lot, filled with pure disgust and terror. Why was this person doing this? I rushed home and showed my parents the scrapbook and whatever notes I still had that had been left in my locker the months before. They called the police and a detective came over to take my story. The next couple of years were spent in constant fear that the stalker would find any way they could to leave notes or gifts. We had to install cameras that recorded all around our house since the person kept coming back multiple times throughout the night. We got alerts of movement outside the front door, but all we could catch was a person wearing all black leaving the creepy items behind. Never enough to suspect anyone. Flash forward to 2018 when I was 22. It had been at least 2 years since the last time I had heard anything from my stalker. I calmed down a lot when I moved away from university. I was a 20-hour drive from my hometown, and instead of letters and gifts, I got Instagram DMS and emails. Those were things I could handle. Things that didn't scare me as much because now all I had to do was block them. Until one day it just stopped. The relief was incredible, but the paranoia still remained. There was nothing anyone could do or say to make me stop looking over my shoulder. Nothing anyone could do to make me fully trust someone again. That part of life had been ruined for me, taken from me. Even though I was scared, I thought it might finally be time for me to move on, to get on with my life. Up until that point, I'd never had a roommate, never lived with anyone other than my parents and siblings. I was ready. I thought I'd done everything right. I went through the university to find a roommate. I even made a Google application so people could apply online, and I could do a sort of background check on them. It might sound crazy, but I really tried. Most men I passed on. Some even had the audacity to ask for pictures to make sure that I'd be attractive enough for them. It was disgusting, really. That's when I started only taking applications from other women. I met with a few, but we didn't seem to click. That was until I met Ashley. She was funny, smart, and very motivated, and we had almost everything in common. I couldn't find anything negative about her online, and I just felt that it was a perfect fit. She moved in the next month, and everything was great for a while. We became very close, did practically everything together. I didn't realize at the time that a lot of that was mostly because Ashley never really let me go anywhere without her. Not that she was forcing me to stay home, but she always had a reason to tag along. Her cleanliness only got worse when I started dating my boyfriend, Matt. Now, Matt was a really good guy, the perfect gentleman. So, imagine my shock when Ashley never really liked him. She would say really out of the blue stuff like, "You should break up with him. He's not good enough for you." Then, seemingly out of nowhere, she'd say, "No one's good enough for you, well, except for maybe me, of course." Then she'd laugh, and it just felt really off-putting. But after the 10th time of her saying that, I started to realize that it wasn't a joke at all. She didn't want me to be with anyone else because she wanted me to be with her. I tried distancing myself from Ashley and spending more time with Matt, and she became more withdrawn and spent a lot of time in her bedroom. About 5 months into Matt and my relationship, I woke up to the sound of my door creaking open. The light from the hall shined directly into my face, blocking me from seeing the person entering my room. I called out, "Ashley, is that you?" Funny, right? The room was dark now that the door was closed, and I couldn't see anything. I reached toward my nightstand to grab my phone when I felt a hand close around my wrist. I grabbed my phone and harshly pulled my hand away. I turned on the flashlight and wasn't surprised to see Ashley. Of course, it was her. What would surprise me was the fact that she didn't have any clothes on and was holding a doll with a picture of my face stapled to it. It was truly surreal, and I wondered if I was in some sort of nightmare. She was smiling at me and said nothing, just cradled the doll in her arms. I started to scream at her to stop, to get out of my room, but she wouldn't. She just stood there staring. I got out of my bed and rushed out of the room as quickly as I could. I stood in the hallway outside the door to our apartment and called Matt. He lived only 5 minutes away, so I knew he'd be there soon. I watched from the hallway as Ashley paced back and forth in the apartment, humming to the doll. I recognized the song as the same one my mom used to sing to me before I went to sleep. She sang it to me all the way up until I left for school. But it had to be a coincidence, I thought. Matt arrived and was just as shocked and weirded out as I was. He was glad I called him, but admitted that there was nothing he could do. The only option we had was to call the police and have them take her to a mental hospital or something if they found that she was at risk. We thought maybe she had gone out and was just high on a large amount of LSD or something. When the police arrived, they asked her if she knew her name and why she wasn't wearing any clothes. They tried covering her with a blanket, but she threw it off every chance she got. She kept saying her name was something other than the one she'd originally given me. And when they asked her where she was from, I was confused when she said the name of my hometown. She told the police that she was going to hurt herself if she couldn't have me, and that was enough for them to take her to get placed on a psychiatric hold. Once she was gone, Matt and I decided it was a good idea to go into her room to see if we could find anything else about her being a different person than the one she led us to believe. What we found was eye-opening and gave me the closure I desperately needed. Inside her closet was what I can only describe as a shrine to me. There were pictures of me sleeping, eating, and walking around town, but the pictures that made me understand why she did what she did were the ones from high school. Ones of me when I was only 15. She even had a few of me standing next to my mom's minivan, opening the scrapbook my stalker had made me. And that's when it hit me. My stalker wasn't some guy from one of my classes or even a guy at all. It had been Ashley, a woman, the whole time. That was something I never expected. We called the police again, and they took pictures of the shrine before taking it down and bagging it as evidence. Now, I want to make it clear. Nothing Ashley did was violent or threatening in any way. In saying this, there was no way she was going to get jail time, and I actually didn't really think that she should. Instead, I got a restraining order against her. She's not allowed within a certain distance of me, and no contact whatsoever. I was happy about that. It had been 3 years, and I hadn't heard from her since. Her mother did reach out to tell me that she was on medication and not to worry about her anymore. I never did get to ask why she was as obsessed with me as she was. I still get curious sometimes, but never curious enough to try to figure it out. All I really learned from her mom at the time was that she was from my high school, but just one of those faces I never really paid any mind. Her mom even told me that she was under the impression that we were close friends back then. I just can't believe she went through all that trouble to move states just to be closer to me. It's hard to imagine I invited my own stalker into my home to live with me. Make sure your roommate is someone you can trust, someone you know. When you have someone in your house, the place you eat, sleep, and expect to be safe, you need to know they wouldn't do anything to harm you. I made the mistake of trusting a total stranger and inviting her into my home to live with me. I put an ad on the bulletin board at the grocery store where I work. One of my coworkers, who I didn't really know, called and told me she needed a place and that she'd love to rent the other room in my apartment. The other girls I worked with all said she was cool and that she'd be a great roommate, so I agreed. She moved in, and I immediately noticed she was one of the most socially awkward people I'd ever met. She could barely look me in the eyes, and whenever I entered a common room she was in, she'd leave and go back into her bedroom. I didn't know if I was doing something to make her uncomfortable, but I also couldn't really find out because she wouldn't talk to me. I tried my best to make her feel like it was as much her home as it was mine, but there was nothing I could really do to get on her good side and have us be friends. I asked my coworker if they told the truth about her being cool and fun, and they said they were being completely honest when they vouched for her. They didn't know why she was acting the way she was with me. She'd never given off any red flags to them before. She was living with me for a few months before I felt comfortable enough to have my boyfriend come over. I wanted her to feel settled first out of respect, but her attitude never changed, and I was tired of waiting. I told her the day before that he was coming over, and she said it was fine. The next night, after going to dinner, my boyfriend and I came back to my apartment to watch a movie. We sat on the sofa and turned on a random movie. Halfway through, we heard her door open, and she came out completely nude. I yelled at her to go back into her room, and she giggled and said she didn't notice. She went back into her room and came back out in a robe. She sat right between my boyfriend and me, basically squeezing herself into the small space separating my leg and his, and asked what we were watching. She dragged her fingers across my boyfriend's leg while she waited for an answer. It was obviously uncomfortable, and I got up quickly. I immediately told her what she was doing was gross and inappropriate, but she just rolled her eyes at me. The next few times he came over, she acted the same way. She shamelessly flirted with him, trying to seduce him or something. It was really bizarre. No matter how much he told her how disgusting she was acting, she never seemed to let up. A few weeks later, she started acting differently towards him. Still overly nice, but not flirting. She'd make him full meals and once in a while make me something too. Her occasional offers of making new meals became nightly, and I began to get used to her doing all the cooking. I guess I appreciated it, especially after long days at work, and I never turned them down. After a while of living together, I got sick, really sick. I woke up nauseous all the time and could barely hold myself up most days. I thought maybe it was the flu at first, but after a few weeks, I knew something was seriously wrong. My boyfriend took me to the doctor multiple times, but nothing ever came of it. I never could figure out what was wrong. I had allergy tests, blood tests, and even a brain scan, but there was seemingly nothing physically wrong with me. I went weeks where I didn't feel right. My roommate started acting weirdly nice towards me during this time, taking care of me, bringing me soup and medicine. I was so grateful for her. I felt like we were finally connecting. We'd watch movies, listen to music, and it was great. I felt like we were starting to finally get close to each other, which made what she did to me even harder to process. After months of my symptoms getting worse and finding no solution, I started to feel like I was never going to get better. Then one morning, when I decided to get up earlier than usual, I went into the kitchen and saw my roommate making me something to eat. Something she'd done most mornings voluntarily. She was putting everything onto a cute tray, like she did when she brought me breakfast in bed. I watched her for a second, about to say something, when I saw her grab a bottle from under the sink. She unscrewed the cap and poured some of whatever it was into my smoothie. I ran back to my room before she saw me standing there and laid back in bed to make it look like I was still asleep. She came in and set my food in front of me, but I told her I was too nauseous to eat. She complained and tried to get me to eat, but I refused as politely as possible so she wouldn't get suspicious. She left for work an hour later, and I went into the kitchen to see what it was she was putting in my food. I pulled out the bottle and was horrified when the label read, antifreeze. I realized it was her who had been poisoning me this entire time, making me feel the way I did. I didn't want to believe it, but it really seemed like she was trying to kill me. I immediately rushed to the hospital with my boyfriend and got a blood test that came back positive for high levels of ethylene glycol. Apparently, ethylene glycol is exceptionally hard to detect in a blood test unless it's been specifically instructed to look for that compound, which explains why the past blood tests came up with nothing being wrong with me. The doctors were amazed that I was still alive after having been ingesting these toxins for weeks. I should have been dead. We reported this immediately, and she was arrested that evening. Surprisingly, she admitted to everything. The detective said that she was so calm and acted as though what she did was totally normal. She said that she wanted to be with my boyfriend and saw getting rid of me as the only way to have him. She was actually going to murder me to have a guy. Psychotic, right? She was sentenced to 7 years in prison for attempted murder. It wasn't relief that I felt when I watched her get sentenced, but a sense of closure. I felt like I was going crazy when I was sick, and no doctor could tell me what was wrong. All I can say to everyone out there thinking of letting a stranger be your roommate: if you don't fully trust someone, don't ingest anything they give you. Disgusted and repulsed don't even begin to describe what I felt toward my ex-roommate. She was really something else. Moving into the dorms your freshman year of college is supposed to be one of those fun experiences in life, something you look forward to all summer. Well, I looked forward to it, at least. Move-in day went well, but I was a little disappointed when they told me I wouldn't be having a roommate. I always envisioned my roommate becoming my best friend and doing everything together, but I guess that wasn't meant to be. The first half of the school year went great. I made plenty of friends and had gotten really used to having the remote to myself. When they told me I'd be getting a roommate in January, I was actually pretty bummed. I cleaned up the other half of the room to accommodate the girl who would be moving in and just hoped that we would get along. She came the second week of January, when we had gotten back from winter break. She told me her name was Cassandra, but she preferred Cassie. Cassie didn't have much. She said it was because her parents never bought her anything, and whatever she had bought herself. I think she had maybe 4 boxes in total. I felt bad for her and told her she could borrow some of my stuff if she ever needed to, but to ask first so I wouldn't think I just lost it or something. I quickly realized Cassie wasn't the average 18-year-old girl. She was different. First, she had horrible hygiene. I had to beg her a few times to take a shower in the nicest way possible because she would smell so bad that I actually would gag when I entered the room. She always thought it was kind of funny. She never washed her clothes, which also meant that the clothes she would borrow from me never got washed either. She would give me back my shirts with sweat stains and food covering the front. It was like this girl had never been taught any manners or basic social skills in her life. But the worst thing about Cassie was her obsession with eating raw meat. I'm not kidding. One day, I walked in on her eating cuts of raw bacon. She tried hiding it when I walked in, but there was no way I could unsee that. I asked her why she was eating raw bacon, not to shame her, but because I was genuinely morbidly curious. She said it was something she'd always done growing up and that her parents ate raw meat too. She said it was just a normal thing for her. I honestly thought it was completely disgusting, but I also was trying to be a good roommate and as nice as I could. So, I told her as long as I didn't have to witness her eating it in front of me, I was cool with her keeping her raw meat in the mini fridge. I should never have said that. The next day, I opened the mini fridge to find it full of pounds of meat. All different kinds. Bacon, ground beef, different cuts of steak, and even some goat meat. When Cassie walked in and saw me staring into the fridge, she looked at me, smiling ear to ear, so proud of her meat stash. She bragged about the deals she found, and before I could stop her, she reached in front of me, grabbed a package of ground beef, opened it up, and started shoving it into her mouth. I almost threw up right then. I was yelling at her to stop, and with meat still in her mouth, she just laughed. I reacted in horror when I felt bits of it land near me, and that only made her laugh harder. The next day, I requested a room change. I couldn't take it anymore. I was told that it would only be possible in the next 2 weeks. I was fine with that as long as it meant I could escape the nightmare that was this disgusting person known as Cassie. She really freaked me out. I told her she wasn't allowed to borrow my stuff anymore since she never returned anything in a good enough state for me to use. She was upset but seemed to understand. We didn't talk much the week after I requested a room change. She continued to stash all her meat in the fridge, but at least she wasn't eating in front of me anymore. A couple of days before I was due to move out of the room, I was sitting at my desk next to Cassie when she walked out of the room. I got a call from one of my friends and leaned back as we talked. I was looking around the room when my eyes settled on her computer. One of the tabs had 3 words that read, "Wanted fresh meat." I laughed and told my friend what I saw. He told me to click on it and see what it was because he was curious. I never in my wildest dreams would have expected to see what was on there. When I clicked on the tab, my laughing quickly halted. My friend was asking me over and over what it was, but I was too scared to even speak. It was an ad that she had posted on a website I had never even heard of. The fresh meat she was looking for wasn't from a cow, pig, or goat. She had posted a wanted ad for fresh human meat. In the ad, she carefully explained how she liked eating raw meat and that she always dreamed about what human meat would taste like. She seemed obsessed with it. Mine completely caught me off guard and made me want to join the witness protection program immediately. In it, she said, "Eating human flesh has consumed my every thought. Sometimes I watch my roommate sleeping and fantasize about chewing on her." I took a picture of it with my phone and clicked off of it so she wouldn't notice I was on her computer. I grabbed my bag and headed out, telling my friend to meet me at the police station immediately. I told them everything and showed them the picture of the ad. In conjunction with the university, they were concerned. They spoke to Cassie about it, and surprisingly, she admitted to everything. They took it as far as actually testing all the meat in the fridge, since we lived on campus, but thankfully it was all either beef or pork. I was able to get a restraining order against her, and she was expelled from the university for apparently accessing the dark web while using the school's Wi-Fi and for attempting to engage in illegal activities. Now, for a while, people actually compared Cassie to that German guy, Armin Meiwes, who cannibalized a person who volunteered to be eaten. Who knows if she really would have gone through with it, though. I don't think Cassie was ever charged for what she did. I tried to distance myself from her as much as possible. Hearing her name 5 years later would still be too soon after her arrest. I just never saw her again. I think she must have just moved away out of embarrassment for what she did. She was expelled from the school, and the entire town knew who she was and what she did. They wouldn't know escaping the whispers and dirty looks. I do hope that she got the help she clearly needed. I still don't know how anyone could survive eating raw meat like the way she did. I ended up getting a new roommate after that who was perfectly normal. Maybe even a little boring in some ways, but that was totally okay with me. I'll take boring over a cannibal any day.